Hello, welcome. Welcome. This is the global community for adults who are healing CPTSD from childhood trauma. My name is Athena. I'll be facilitating our time together this evening. And I just want to warmly welcome you if this is your first time joining us, if you're newer to our community. We are a group of adults who are healing complex trauma, repeated relational trauma. And we have all been coming together here weekly for 11 years. 11 years this week. We've been sharing what works for us in our healing journey. We share what hasn't been working for us. And so if you're new, if this is your first time joining us for our weekly discussion, 7 p.m. on Mondays, 7 p.m. Eastern on Mondays, then welcome. And for those who have been joining me here for the better part of a decade, I had a memory pop up the other day. Is Ninja Taco here? Let me see if I can find Ninja Taco. If anyone sees Ninja Taco, tell him tell him to ask me about my memory that popped up on Facebook. I had a memory pop up on Facebook, and it was like 9 years ago. And it was just something we were messaging back and forth or something. So anyway, for those of you who have been on this journey, this healing journey beside me for the better part of a decade or more, with my hand on my heart, I just want to say thank you. And for those who are new to the family, we're glad you're here. I'm just going to pause before we get started. For those of you who are unaware, this YouTube channel is made possible by the Foundation for Post-Traumatic Healing and Complex Trauma Resource. The Foundation for Post-Traumatic Healing and Complex Trauma Research. I was looking at the word resources here on the page. Thank you, brain. Let's start over. So this YouTube channel is made possible by you, the community of adults who have all chosen to come together and heal beside one another, and I can't thank you enough. If you would like to join a community of other adults who are on a similar healing path and who have a similar lived experience as you, so that you can experience less minimization, less invalidation, more warmth, acknowledgement, acceptance. If you want to experience a felt sense of empathy, the goal is always for us to feel seen and heard and valued, all within the context of safe enoughness, so that we know that whatever feelings we might be experiencing regarding our trauma and wherever we are in our healing journey, we walk away having experienced that felt sense of empathy. So that's what we are attempting to do. We have an entire community away from social media, and we look forward to welcoming you. I'm just going to pause and say hello to everyone who's here before we get started. We are on page 286. I forget which chapter this is. Page 286 on Pete Walker's most recent book, Holistically Treating Complex PTSD, a six-dimensional approach. And it's been very, very, it's been a good reminder of some of his other work. And also I'm going to, as I mentioned a couple weeks ago, I really want to go on record and say that this is his most accessible work. It really is the most comprehensive and most accessible for any practitioner, survivor, partner, supporter, anyone who wants to better understand what is CPTSD? What is complex trauma? What are the effects of repeated relational trauma? How can we heal? What does that look like? So Before we get started, I want to say hello to everyone who's here. Hello and a very warm welcome to you, Candida and Jeffrey Sherman. We missed you too, Candida. I'm waving back to you, Jeffrey Sherman. Hello, brave Vanessa. Hi, back to you. Hello, Karen. We welcome you here. Hello, Kate and Jen and John Harvey. Special thank you to John Harvey for always bringing me cake and donuts. I appreciate you so much. I had a donut yesterday, thought of you, and it was absolutely delicious. Hello to you, Kitty. Hello, Bianca. Hello, Nadine. Oh, my chat box is moving so fast. Hello, Ninja Taco. Hello, Mary. So happy to see you. Hello, Merzui. Greetings. Hello, honey. So happy to see you. Hello. Hello to anyone else I didn't greet by name. So happy to see each of you. Thank you for your presence. Thank you for showing up for you. Thank you for choosing to be here. And a very special extra measure of gratitude, as I mentioned, to John Harvey and Ninja Taco for keeping our chat box space a safe enough space for our community to arrive and feel safe enough, right? There's no such thing as 100% safety in the world. No one can guarantee that. But this has been consistently and reliably a safe enough space for our community to come together and just check in on one another, even if it is just once a week. Hello, Skylight at Dusk. So happy to see you. Thank you for the flowers. I appreciate you. Ninja Taco, I don't know if you heard, but there was a memory of something that popped up the other day. And it was like 9 years ago. It wasn't Facebook either, actually. It was here on YouTube. It was some sort of comment on something, and there was a comment from you. And anyway, so great to see you, Recovery Buddy. Yeah. I'm going to get a sip of water. I want to invite you to get comfortable. Oh, someone said coloring. Is Kitty coloring? Yes. I love that you're coloring. Kitty says, hello, Jeffrey. I've been okay, I think. Been fixated on coloring for a few days, so that's been preoccupying my mind. Jeffrey says, I had a great mental health nervous system day. Oh my goodness. Okay, can I just pause right now, Jeffrey, and just high five you? Because that is such great news, and regardless of where anyone finds themselves here today, whether you're having a really rough day, yes, chronic pain does suck, Jen. Absolutely, yes. I'm so sorry that you're dealing with chronic pain. Anyone else who is dealing with chronic pain, I just want to say I see you, I hear you. And Jeffrey is offering all of us a hug for anyone who's having a rough week. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I've been doing okay. Chronic pain sucks. CPTSD sucks. But I've been taking as good a care of myself as I possibly can. So, yeah. So I'm just going to get a sip of water, and then we're going to go ahead and we're continuing where we are in this book right now, which is on angering. Ooh, brave Vanessa brought some snacks. Thank you for the cake, Vanessa. Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. Yum. Bianca says, My husband had a brain injury and it triggers my CPTSD. So when I am in chronic stress, so often I'm in chronic stress. Oh my goodness. I'm so sorry, Bianca. My hand is on my heart. I'm so sorry. You all are so kind. Hello and a very warm welcome to you, Rebecca. Rebecca is here from Wisconsin. We warmly welcome you to our community, Rebecca. Is this your first time here with us? My name's Athena. And here's a link to our community. Whoops, it won't let me post a link to our community. Oh, it says error. Try again. There we go. We have been joining together here weekly for about 11 years. And, oh, Rebecca says, I have been listening to the whole book so far. Oh my goodness, that's amazing. Oh, we're so glad to see you here. I know I'm skipping around a lot in the book. We have a lot of our community members really struggle to access their anger. So the spot where we are is, yes, Vanessa says, is this the link for a peer-to-peer chat support group? Yes, it is. Thank you, Vanessa. Yes. Yes. So a lot of our community members really struggle to access their anger because many of us grew up in environments where anger was either used to control us or scare us, or there was a high level of interpersonal conflict, family of origin distress, dysfunction. There was quite often physical neglect during childhood, emotional neglect, abuse, and even exploitation. And so anger feels scary in the body. And so anytime we may feel something that might be even anger adjacent, we end up shutting down into a dissociative state, like a freeze state. Or most often in this community, what I've learned over the past decade or so, we shift into a fawn response, which is we turn into whatever we need to turn into to create pockets of safety so that we can be whoever we need to be, and we can become needless or useful, helpful. We can become the happy one, the joyful one, the helpful one. We can be and do anything as long as it means that we will remain safe. And so this anger work that we're doing here, this angering work with Pete Walker in this portion of the book, has been quite transformational. Thank you all so much for your feedback on this particular topic. I'm going to go ahead and get started now that we are all here. If anyone wants to comment in the comment section on the replays, the content for the book and the topic of angering for week 11 will begin right around minute number 14 in the video, minute number 14 or 15. Hello, Charity. Oh, is it Charity? I'm sorry, I need glasses. The funny thing is I have glasses on. That's how pathetic this is. Like, I'm getting so old. What I meant to say is hello, Shanty. Hello, Shanty love. I will tell you, is it verbal ventilation this week? We are finishing up anger and maybe starting verbal ventilation, but verbal ventilation is most definitely, yeah, verbal ventilation might start tonight, but it will definitely trickle into next week. 100%. Good catch. Thank you, Kitty. We're finishing up on anchoring work, diminishing the repetition compulsion, and restoring instinctual self-protectiveness. So Shanti Love, we are on page 286, and we are going to go ahead and get started now. So please, you are not late. You are right on time. And here we go. Am I? Perhaps we're overlapping. Let me check in with Kitty. Kitty, am I overlapping? Oh, Karen says, yes, I was looking at my notes from last week. Yes, absolutely. So I hope I'm not overlapping. It's only a couple of paragraphs if I am overlapping. Yeah, it's only a couple paragraphs if I'm overlapping the diminishing of the repetition compulsion. And then we go directly into restoring instinctual protectiveness, which leads us to temporary splitting, and that touches verbal ventilation. Absolutely. Yes, verbal ventilation is 292, but we are right now on page 286, and that's on the paperback version of the book. I think it might be a little bit different in Kindle, so. Yes, Jeffrey, restoring instinctual protectiveness for sure. Oh, thank you. A very special thank you to Nadine for finding the PDF for the book, helping with accessible resources. Thank you so much. So this starts off with a quote from Scott Peck, The Road Less Traveled. I'm starting to remember that I think Mary made a comment about this last week. So this first blurb is an overlap from last week, but it's so good that I'm going to read it again. It's only a couple paragraphs, and then we'll be directly into restoring instinctual self-protectiveness. So the quote from Scott Peck, The Road Less Traveled, is, "Anger is an emotion bred into us by countless generations of evolution in order that our survival may be encouraged. Without our anger, we would indeed be continually stepped on until we were totally squashed and exterminated." End quote. And that's Scott Peck, The Road Less Traveled. And a special thank you to Mary. You are the reason why I remembered this. I was replying to your comment over the weekend. So Pete says, when therapists aid us survivors, aid us to resuscitate our instinctual anger about parental maltreatment, simultaneously we begin deconstructing our unconscious acceptance of others' reenactments of our parents' traumatizing behavior. And Pete says, a meek, visibly fearful client of mine suffered devastating sexual abuse from trusted male figures on 3 occasions in her adult life. And over time, we trace these back to a childhood betrayal by a trusted uncle, the only seemingly kind caretaker of her childhood. She was emotionally abandoned by her parents, and he preyed upon her loneliness. He gradually took appropriate physical affection, one increment at a time, into contact that became increasingly sexual. Pete says, my client felt helpless with her uncle because her ability to say no was parentally extinguished by the time she was in preschool. The ability to say no is the backbone of our instinct of self-protectiveness. And without that, she was unable to protest his sexual violations. On subsequent occasions in her adult life, a minister, a doctor, and then a therapist exploited her. via a reenactment of this original scenario. She was immediately triggered into an emotional flashback all 3 times. She dissociated so much that she did not protest their exploitative betrayals. She could only react to these situations later by turning her anger inward and then blaming and shaming herself for not stopping it. During our work together, my gentle and repetitive encouragement enabled her to gradually get angry about all of those betrayals. And my elicitation of her anger was very similar to the process I described in the Chapter 4 vignette. About 6 months after a great deal of angering in sessions and all of her past perpetrators, she came into her session glowing with pride. She welled up with tears of joy and relief as she described her success in stopping an office predator who was in the early stages of a parallel seduction. This was the stage of seemingly friendly touching. Unwanted pats on the back gradually escalated into a hand resting on her shoulder. And my client told me, typically in the past, this was soon followed by subtle sexual innuendo, lingering touches on my hand and my forearm. And I was never in the past able to protest these inappropriate advances. But this time, she gloated, I suddenly found myself sternly saying, in the presence of another coworker no less, please don't touch me. I don't like it when you touch me, and I don't want you to touch me anymore. She said, I am so thrilled and I am in awe of myself. So for many weeks after that, she delighted in starting each session with me with an update that the foiled seduction was dead in the water and her would-be predator avoided her like the plague. You know, healing is possible. We just need people to encourage us. Thank you for bearing with me in my few paragraphs from last week. So now we begin restoring instinctual self-protectiveness, which begins with a quote from Rainer Maria Rilke. If only we would let ourselves be dominated as things do by some intense storm, we would become strong too. And then there is a quote here, which is a Navajo prayer, which we did talk about last week. You all, I think I read the Navajo prayer to you. Let me see if I am on temporary splitting. You know what? I think Karen tried to point me in the right direction. Let me get my glasses. Where's Karen? Is Karen still here? She's probably like, Athena, I tried to tell you what page we were on. Karen, I'm so sorry. So, as Karen so helpfully pointed out, we are on page 292, and I appreciate you. Thank you all in advance for your kindness, your grace, your, just accepting me just as I am. I'm getting old, I can't see, and we're going to start with verbal ventilation. So thank you to Kitty, who mentioned it, tried to set me on the right track. Thank you, Kitty. And thank you, Karen, for giving me the page number. Kitty and Karen are the real MVPs. Who the MVPs? Kitty and Karen are the MVPs. Now we will begin. An old Chinese saying, joy shared is doubled, and sorrow shared is halved. And a quote from Shakespeare. Give sorrow words. The grief that does not speak whispers up the o'er-fraught heart and bids it break. End quote. Pete says, verbal ventilation is a third key process of grieving. Verbal venting is a potent healing amalgam of releasing and relieving two terrible, continuous sources of CPTSD pain. First, the cognitive pain of obsessive, negative noticing and surrendering the control of one's psyche to the toxic critic. And second, the emotional pain of loneliness, sadness, anger, fear, shame, and depression. Skilled therapists will guide survivors to verbally vent in a way that effectively resolves their emotional flashbacks and motivates them to work on remediating their developmental arrests. Verbal ventilation is speaking or writing in a manner that airs out and releases painful feelings. Survivors' words can spring from what they feel and be imbued with emotion when therapists make it safe enough for them to vulnerably vent in sessions. Their emotional pain and somatic stress can then be released as their words are intoned with the fear, shame, anger, sadness, and hopelessness of what currently hurts. Verbal ventilation is therapeutic to the degree that the client's words are colored by their feelings. Venting that is liberally punctuated with actual crying or angering is especially powerful. As therapists' empathy and psychoeducation opens survivors to grieving, they can then steer them to verbally vent about their childhood losses. And this, in turn, aids survivors to work through unreleased childhood pain. At the same time, it also develops their arrested abilities to communicate therapeutically about their suffering. Therapists can fine-tune the skill by modeling empathic language that builds a healing narrative of how recoverees were deprived of their birthright to be welcomed into a loving family. Emphasizing how this occurred through no fault of their own can do wonders in dissipating their toxic shame. Therapists can expedite this healing by encouraging survivors to practice this process at home through journaling and speaking it silently or aloud. Their journaling can also be enriched through free associative writing about each therapy session, their dreams, trauma literature reading, podcast listening, trauma support group attendance. Those who get the most out of this process also verbally ventilate therapeutically in writing or with their voice in support groups that they join and in mutually therapeutic co-counseling relationships that they form. My favorite therapeutic technique to deepen recovery work is to encourage survivors to verbally vent in an uncensored manner about whatever comes to mind while they focus on their feelings and sensations. So beautifully put. Can I please just pause and underscore how absolutely life-changing it is to be a part of a community of others like we are here, where we can simply come and share and release, and we know that we're not going to be judged. I love how much emphasis Pete is putting on this. We're on page 294, section of the book, Theoretical Neuroscience of Verbal Ventilation. Verbal ventilation is a tool that can help repair the brain changes that are caused by developmental trauma disorder, or CPTSD. Susan Vaughn's MRI research, as described in her astute book, The Talking Cure, describes how emotional flashbacks overactivate the emotionally oriented right brain and deactivate the thinking-oriented left brain. Because of this hemispheric polarization, survivors re-experience overwhelming childhood emotional pain without having much access to the higher cognitive functions of their left brains. This temporary loss of perspective explains why untreated survivors forget that they are just flashing back and not really stranded in the danger, helplessness, and hopelessness of the past. Therapists can use this information to awaken them to the fact that they are in a flashback when the virulent critic has usurped control of their psyches. Therapists can then temporarily stand in the survivor's left brain and reiterate to them the pertinent soothing steps of the 13 flashback management steps listed in Chapter 12. If you all do not have a list, the 13 flashbacks, I have a link and I will put it in the chat box as soon as I'm done reading this evening. Okay? It's free. It's on pete-walker.com / flashback management, I think is what it's called. pete-walker.com / flashback management. Continuing at the bottom of page 294, here is one powerful protocol that therapists can use at such times. Begin with step 7, which promotes a soothing activation of the parasympathetic nervous system. And then move to the prompts of step 8 for resisting the virulent critic. Then evoke step 9 to coax the process of grieving that can often quickly resolve a flashback. Grieving then can often be stimulated by encouraging clients to focus on their feelings and sensations, and then inviting them to remember when they felt that way before. Once they come up with a memory, therapists can then encourage them to emote and verbally vent about any recalled abuse or neglect. With ongoing practice, such as interventions, bring left brain cognition back online. They restore a pre-triggered perspective to the survivor, which then increases their ability to put words to feelings and to defend themselves from the critic. Ultimately, this aids them to accurately interpret, integrate, and communicate about the early trauma they are experiencing. That they are re-experiencing. The flashback is often transformed into a therapeutic experience. Susan Vaughn's research shows that when this process is repeated sufficiently, new neural pathways grow that promote the left and right brain working together so that the survivor can actually think and feel at the same time. The corpus callosum is the part of the brain that connects the left and the right hemispheres. Susan Vaughn's research shows that the corpus callosum is smaller in many CPTSD survivors, but that it grows discernibly as the brain generates new neurons and new neuronal connections via the process described in the previous paragraph. I'm going to repeat the previous paragraph because this right here This neuroscience research that Pete is sharing is what gives us in this community hope. This is what Richard Grannon often refers to when he says, if we can learn it, we can unlearn it, right? Or when I'm talking with you all about how if we are experiencing a flashback in the right hemisphere and we're trying to get over and finding words so that we can access our executive functioning to go to work, feed the dogs, do the dishes, do the chores, and put things in a list and put things in order so we can actually do our lives, we try to go from the right hemisphere of the brain where we're experiencing the flashback and get to the left hemisphere of the brain, but the bridge is out. The corpus callosum is out. It's been hijacked by the amygdala, because guess what? All of those lists are located in the front of your forehead, in a place where your executive functioning lives in your prefrontal cortex. The only access from the right hemisphere of the brain to your forehead is over the bridge, the corpus callosum, into the left hemisphere and take the off-ramp to the forehead. But if your bridge is out and been hijacked by your amygdala due to an emotional flashback, what Pete is saying here actually works. They watch it happen. They do brain scans. I'm going to read these last two paragraphs here on page 295. And please make note of this. This is what gives us hope. This community, thousands of us, healing together. This is what gives us hope. Pete says, the flashback is often transformed into a therapeutic experience. Susan Vaughn's research shows that when this process is repeated sufficiently, new neural pathways grow that promote the left and right brain working together so that the survivor can actually think and feel at the same time. The corpus callosum is the part of the brain that connects the left and the right hemispheres. Susan's research shows that the corpus callosum is smaller in many CPTSD survivors, but that it grows discernibly as the brain generates new neurons and new neuronal connections via the processes described in the previous paragraphs. So again, go to pete-walker.com/flashback management, and what he says is to begin with step 7, and he's speaking to therapists to begin at step 7. If it were me, since I'm a survivor and I am not an independently licensed clinician or a therapist, I would not begin on step 7. I would begin at step 1. I would remind myself, I'm having a flashback. Okay? So now we're at the bottom of page 295, and we are in a subsection called Thinking and Feeling Simultaneously. Becoming proficient at verbal ventilation heals a crucial developmental arrest. Survivors learn to think and talk about their feelings in ways that create healthy, helpful, and appropriate responses to their own and others' feelings. These responses typically build a type of self-respect and respect of others that supports the growth of the commiserative intimacy described in Chapter 3, which is basically what we enjoy here in this community. Top of page 296. With continued practice, verbal ventilation can mollify flashbacks by rejoining the flashback disconnected left hemisphere of the brain with the hyperactivated right hemisphere. With the left brain back online, the survivor can then use the flashback management steps to successfully resolve a flashback. This process is cited in Susan Vaughn's MRI research in the previous section. As with angering and crying, verbal ventilation is only effective when it is protected from the pathologizing processes of the virulent inner critic. In early trauma recovery, verbal ventilation can easily shift into verbal self-flagellation. I'm a living proof of that, that's for sure. It took me a really long time. Pete goes on, verbally ventilating from the self-attacking or drasticizing perspective of the critic is rarely effective grieving. Instead, it triggers or intensifies flashbacks, which in turn frequently generate self and or intimacy injuring behavior. Once again, therapists need to notice this when it happens and help the survivor to resist and disidentify from the critic. Most survivors in early trauma recovery are unable to notice their unconscious shifts from over-identifying with the critic's point of view. When this is the case, they usually need the therapist to rescue them from the virulent critic. Therapists do this by identifying and contradicting the critic and encouraging the survivor to also rebuff the critic's negative noticing. Once clients succeed in rejecting the critic, the therapists can then coach them to positively notice themselves. Most survivors benefit a great deal from their therapist modeling soothing self-talk. Verbal ventilation is an especially transformative grieving process. Emotionally, its angry and sad tones can release fear and dissolve shame. Cognitively, its awakened perceptiveness can expose the manifold guises of the critic's perfectionistic and fear arousal programs. Just as importantly, verbal ventilation can also evolve with practice to help survivors to identify and address the remediation of all of their developmental arrests. Therapists can teach their survivor clients Gestalt therapy's empty chair technique, in which clients vent at a past tormentor who they imagine is sitting in an empty chair in front of them. Therapists can introduce this technique by enacting it in session and then use it whenever it seems helpful. This also provides survivors with a powerful tool that they can use on their own to shrink their critic and manage their flashbacks more proficiently. They can also do this by putting their critic and members of its committee in the hot seat. Once again, verbally venting alone is a helpful therapeutic technique as long as no one within earshot is disturbed. If a client's room is not private, they can be encouraged to drive to a secluded spot to do their venting and put the critic in the passenger seat of the car. One of my clients kept an 18-inch length of rubber hose and a phone book on the passenger seat of her car, and during the year that she was doing the lion's share of her anger work, she struck the hose loudly and repeatedly on the phone book whenever her internalized pedophile father invaded her mind in a flashback. She would pull over for this, of course, and found that over time she could do it relatively inconspicuously in places with surprisingly limited privacy. The sound of the hose on the phone book sounded like a gunshot to her, and it empowered her to do a remarkable amount of critic shrinking and introject removal work. Now we're moving on with Pete to the topic of dissociation and what it can do to our verbal ventilation. So for those of our community, myself included, who tend to dissociate when things get a little bit too much, if anyone happens to be in kind of a lull or a dissociative state right now, I want to warmly invite you back into this space, maybe taking a slow breath in and just a soft sigh out. I'm going to get a sip of water and we're going to talk about dissociation. Bottom of page 297. Dissociation is a defense against trauma. for which children seem to be pre-programmed. It is the 4F freeze response that distracts and protects them from being overwhelmed by the full brunt of their abandonment pain. Freeze response survivors also learn to dissociate because their dysfunctional parents typically respond to their grieving with dire consequences. Here are 2 types of dissociation commonly found in CPTSD: right brain dissociation and left brain dissociation. It is important to differentiate verbal ventilation from right brain. Dissociative flights of fantasy and left brain, obsessive bouts of flashback triggering and worrying. So here we go. Right brain dissociation can be seen as classical dissociation and as the defense most common in freeze types and subtypes. It is a right brain process of numbing out in reaction to overwhelming feelings and to inner critic attack. Dissociation is initially a process of distraction from the unbearable. Traumatized children are aided in their need to distract themselves from inner pain by getting lost in fantasy, fogginess, media screens, oversleeping, and awareness-dulling drugs. Untreated survivors are typically diminished by this process their whole lives if they do not find effective treatment. Verbally reporting from a place of self-distraction is usually the opposite of verbal ventilation. Getting lost in a daydream-like descriptions of improbable salvation fantasies is a common way that clients avoid their pain in therapy sessions. Another common example is recounting long, elaborate dreams that are devoid of emotional content or serious attempts at introspection. Early in my career, this is Pete speaking, I worked briefly with a freeze-fight type client who dissociated endlessly in session by monologuing about his dreams. Lawrence recalled the bland minutiae of the dreams in lifeless, excruciating detail. In fact, his deadened delivery was emblematic of the way he talked about almost everything. Lawrence was also a Jungian intern therapist who locked up his vulnerability with a belief that dream work was the pièce de résistance of therapy. I often wondered if he and his clients frequently nodded off with each other. My attempts to guide him into exploring his deeper underlying experience were routinely met with the hackles of his fight response. He would say, "I'm here to get in touch with the healing archetypes and not to waste my time rehashing the past." Pete says, "I was unfortunately not experienced enough at the time to help him see how his dissociative defense stopped him from understanding and recovering from the stultifying impact of his violent alcoholic father and helicopter-like intrusive mother. Sadly, he left therapy disgruntled and still trapped in an isolation that was exacerbated by alienating others with his distant, abstract, and non-interactive right brain ramblings." Now on to left brain dissociation. Left brain dissociation is often seen as the obsessiveness of fight types and subtypes. Commonly, this ranges in severity from dwelling on a singular worry to repetitively cycling through a list of worries to panicky, drasticizing, catastrophizing, and hypochondriacizing. There we go. I really have a hard time with that word. Drasticizing, catastrophizing, and hypochondriacizing. So this type of perseverative dissociation is a defense against repressed emotional pain. It strands survivors in unhelpful ruminations about issues that are unrelated or minimally related to the true nature of their suffering. Here is a common example of left brain dissociation. Untreated survivors may complain incessantly about the bad weather, high prices, the news, awful celebrity behavior. These survivors cannot stop grumbling about such impersonal issues because no amount of complaining about an irrelevant issue releases the pain that is unconsciously driving their obsessive grievances. When therapists enlighten such survivors about the cost of their dissociation and create a safe enough relationship, their denial about all that they suffered from childhood, abuse, and neglect begins to crumble. Therapists can then aid them to begin to drop their childhood memories and underlying pain. This in turn aids them to identify the shame, fear, and alienation that underlie and fuel all of their developmental trauma and CPTSD symptoms. Therapists can then therapeutically steer and encourage them to verbally vent and grieve out the undealt with core emotional pain of their traumatizing childhoods. I want to pause right here before I move on, and I really want to underscore how Pete really goes into great detail about childhood emotional neglect and childhood physical neglect earlier on in this book, and we did not cover it at length. And he also goes into tremendous detail about all forms of childhood neglect in his books Complex PTSD from Surviving to Thriving, The Tao of Fully Feeling, which is all about grieving, and he touches on it as well in his book titled Homesteading. So I know that we didn't go through this book page by page by page, but I really want to underscore the importance of every single one of us fully acknowledging the weight and the gravity and the impact of neglect, whether it's physical neglect and our basic needs not being met for safety, love, clothing, food, shelter, acceptance, warmth, positive regard, or if it's emotional neglect, where the lights are on but no one's home. Our basic needs are taken care of and attended to. However, we are discouraged to have a thought life or an emotional life, or to be human and have needs and express ourselves in ways that are separate from our primary caregivers. The need to individuate was not honored. Emotionally, the caregivers were not fully present. These types of things will cause such a deep and profound impact. Please don't miss this. It can truly go on for decades until many of us are well into our 40s, 50s, even 60s and 70s. And so this book, truly from cover to cover, will absolutely be able to cover that and speak to it. We just didn't go deeply into those chapters as we are about some of the interventions, such as angering and verbal ventilation and the grieving process, and talking about the development of mutuality and reciprocal support in co-counseling, like finding others that we can connect with, cultivating openness to empathy, awakening self-compassion and self-protectiveness. We talked about that. We talked about transference and emotional flashbacks. And in chapter 2, facilitating relational repair and development, it briefly touches on it, but there is a chapter, I believe it's on page 36, whatever chapter is on page 36, where Pete dives into developmental trauma disorder and CPTSD. He talks about the power of witnessing and validating, and I'm trying to, I'm trying to remember exactly the pages. Anyway, I just, before I move on any further in this book, I really just want to make sure that we pause and acknowledge and fully, fully, fully validate that childhood neglect in any form will absolutely terrorize us until we address it and sit with it, warmly witness it, acknowledge it, validate it, hold space for it, and allow it to give voice to whatever it is it needs to tell us. Okay, it's really important. And for those of you who were unable to find the 13 steps for managing emotional flashbacks, if you do have this book, go to page 182 and you will find it there. Okay? Or you can go to pete-walker.com / I think it's managing flashbacks. But page 182 will give you the exact list. So I'm going to continue reading now. We're still on verbal ventilation, and we're getting ready to go into a portion where Pete speaks directly to how verbal ventilation can help us with abandonment and with intimacy, and then next week we're going to talk about fully feeling and working through emotional pain and the emotion and body connection, and it's going to get pretty emotional next week. I would love to have been able to finish it completely tonight, but it's really worth holding space for as we prepare to go into healing the body and what we need to do to hold space for repairing the pain that we've been in our nervous system, in our bodies, due to our childhood trauma. So we are at the top of page 300, continuing on the topic of left brain dissociation. And Pete says, left brain dissociation can also be seen in intellectualization, which occurs when survivors overly rely on reasoning and cognitive perseverating to distract themselves from the percolating aching of unresolved past traumas. Okay, can I just say that I feel so freaking called out right now? What's up, Uncle Pete? Like, have you been reading my mail? Like, what's the deal? I feel very called out right now. And I do not need to be called out for my intellectualization. So there. Kidding. Moving on, Pete says, renowned novelist Ian McEwan called this the high-walled fortress of focused thinking. Left brain dissociation strands certain survivors in over-depending on complex conjectural thinking and lofty abstract dialogue to protect themselves from the potentially jumbled and painful world of feelings. Even the highest level of creative thinking can deteriorate into an obsessive defense when it is excessively engaged. And again, this is not to say that all cognitive processes above are not highly valuable and worthwhile in moderation. Furthermore, many fight types and subtypes also dissociate and distract themselves from their pain via compulsive doing and busyness. Again, calling me out. This is just not nice. And while a moderate amount of high energy activity is a healthy pursuit, when overdone, it can stymie emotional intelligence and create physical problems of wear and tear. Once again, John Bradshaw described this as becoming a human doing rather than a human being. Therapists can enlighten their clients about this defense and delicately encourage them to dip deeper into their unconscious, emotionally troubling concerns. The vignettes in chapters 2, 3, and 4 provide extensive advice on how to accomplish this. So does the guided mindfulness section earlier in this chapter. Subsequent sections in this chapter and the sections on somatic awareness in the next chapter. Finally, let me emphasize here that while 4F freeze types are especially prone to right brain dissociation, and as 4F fight types are especially prone to left brain dissociation, all of the 4F types can regularly dissociate from their pain in either way. And this is because inner critic attacks are excruciatingly obsessive. Left brain dissociative phenomena, and they generate huge amounts of fear and shame that often induce the right brain dissociative phenomena of brain fog. Habitually hiding one's authentic self is a painful, lonely, self-abandoning symptom of untreated CPTSD. Many survivors come out of childhood believing that whatever they have to say is boring and or dangerous to talk about, as it was with their parents. Again, I'm feeling so called out. I'm gonna cry. Oh my gosh. This is probably this one page is going to break me. Yeah, this page is going to break me. My goodness. Here we go. Jung wisely quipped, "Our feelings tell us what is important to us." Therapists can save survivors from a lifetime of dejected loneliness and ungratifying pursuits by guiding them to share about what is emotionally important to them. This, of course, includes things that excite and please them, as well as things that trouble them. Such practice imparts to them the vitals of connecting with themselves and others in meaningful and healing ways. Verbal ventilation is a key tool with which people establish intimacy. Therapists help survivors to develop their arrested capacity for intimacy by guiding and encouraging them to put words to their feelings as well as feelingly express their words. They can enhance safety in sessions by using the warm, soothing voice and welcoming facial expressions that good enough parents routinely bestow on their infants, toddlers, and older children. On the other hand, most survivors benefit from refraining from vulnerable ventilation with empathyless people. Being shamed for vulnerability can destroy their gains and growing confidence in being authentically vulnerable. Psychoeducation about repetition compulsion and recognizing narcissists can help survivors to discern who is too unsafe to trust. And finally, being vulnerable can easily trigger survivors into flashbacks. They may have flashbacks to past trauma around showing their pain, even when their therapist is wholly benevolent. With enough practice, therapists can learn to recognize this when it happens, even when it is not overly expressed. Therapists can then work to repair trust by reminding their clients that they especially value their vulnerability and that they might be in a flashback. And if that is the case, they can then help the client work through the flashback as described in the theoretical neuroscience section above. Therapists can also elicit clients about whether something they said or did triggered their flashback. If this is the case, they can then clarify and or apologize for what they said. They can also work through the disruption of trust with the client by exploring the possible transference of the client. Guidance for accomplishing this is provided in the transference section in the earlier part of this chapter. Such inquiry becomes especially therapeutic when and if the therapist realizes that their countertransference caused them to say or do something unemphatic. I wonder if that's a typo and it's supposed to be unempathic. I think that's a typo. they can then model the all-important process of apologizing for their mistake. The Chapter 2 section of Collaborative Rapport Repair illustrates the verbal and emotional mechanics of this process. So, next week, we're going to start with intimacy. And at the bottom of page 302, and we will begin the topic of working through emotional pain and the brain-body feeling body and the feeling and body connection and learning how to feel. So that is what we will do next week. I'm going to repeat the very first paragraph of page 301 because it is a great note to end on tonight. This is a gentle reminder to each and every one of you that your voice matters and that you are welcome here and that your presence is valued deeply and that hiding your authentic self is prolonging your healing journey. And I'm speaking from experience. The way that this paragraph is worded is enough to truly just break me open, crack my heart completely open. I know I was joking around about being called out earlier about my intellectualization, but this one paragraph that I'm about ready to read is probably, if you could just sum up, basically my 51, almost 52 years of existence, it would be this. Paragraph 1, page 301, verbal ventilation heals abandonment. Habitually hiding one's authentic self is a painful, lonely, self-abandoning symptom of untreated CPTSD. Many survivors come out of childhood believing that whatever they have to say is as boring and or dangerous to talk about as it was with their parents. So may we know that this is a safe enough space. May we know that we no longer need to hide our authentic self. May each of us know that self-abandoning and hiding ourselves is a symptom of CPTSD. It is not who we are. It's not our authentic selves. And may each of us know that no matter what anyone says, what we have to say it's neither boring nor dangerous. It's okay to be you. It's okay to share. It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to work your ass off in and out of the room trying to find your authentic self. It is a worthy, worthy, worthy journey. Ugh, it just breaks my heart. So, again, next week, we will begin at the bottom of page 302. I'm speaking to you, Kitty. I'm speaking to you, Karen. And I'm speaking to anyone else who's listening. I'm getting old and I can't see. So please bear with me. Help a girl out. If I forget where we're at, next week we're at the bottom of page 302. Thank you all so much. Just want to pause. Just invite you to take a slow breath in. Hello, Greg. I didn't say hello to you earlier. So glad to see you. So glad you're here. Hello to anyone else I didn't greet by name. I think I got a chance to say hi to all of you. Thank you, brave Vanessa. Thank you, thank you, thank you. My chat box froze. Warm welcome to you, Amy. Amy Natalia, we warmly welcome you to our community. Is it your first time here? We're so glad you're here. Worth asking, Amy Natalia, is that you, Natalia? Natalia, who has been here every week for ever, for years? Yeah. You know what we're going to have to go back and do? We're going to have to go back and read chapters 2 and 3. We're going to need to do that. I'm feeling like that's going to need to be on the agenda. I probably shouldn't have skimmed. It felt heavy, like when I started to go there. And I thought, ooh, I don't know if our community's ready for that. I wonder if I should perhaps move to other chapters with more tools, with handles, which is what I did. But here we go. This is me. This is me saying that at some point we will go back to chapters 2 and 3 and we'll do that together, okay? Because I intuitively feel like that's it's gonna crack me open, but you know, each of us know that we've been through a lot. If you found this community, whatever you've been through that brought you to a place like CPTSD Foundation, looking for a weekly discussion group talking about healing CPTSD, you've been through hell. You've worked your ass off, and we can handle a couple of chapters that go deep, right? We can do it. Yeah. So thank you all. Thank you for your presence. I see you. I honor you. I honor your process. And warm welcome to you, Lisa. Lisa's new. This is her first week. Oh, we're so glad you're here. We've all been joining together here weekly for 11 years. We warmly welcome you. Your presence with us is felt and valued. So here is a link to our community away from social media, should you want to join us there. And if not, that's okay. We'll see you here next Monday and every Monday. And in the meantime, please be extra kind and patient and gentle with yourself. As Jeffrey would say, because you're worth it. I love you all so much. Thank you for being in my life and for allowing me to be in yours. Special thank you to John Harvey and Ninja Taco for keeping our chat box safe. Good night, everyone.